Neil Patterson there outside the Ministry of Defence and talking about that knock-on effect. Colonel Gaddafi has denounced the multinational operation as colonial crusader aggression, but as Neil was telling us, the Arab League has backed the imposition of the no-fly zone, and Arab leaders were amongst those gathered in Paris yesterday to finalise plans for action against the Libyan leader. Well, joining me from Amman in Jordan is Prince Hassan, who's also president of the Arab Thought Forum. Very good morning to you, Prince Hassan. You talked, and we talked in the past about the regional security challenges, which I know you broadly define, though. But at the moment, is a rogue Colonel Gaddafi the biggest security challenge to the region?
The no-fly zone doesn't mean a no-think zone, and I want to say that I was sitting with the granddaddy of all the Arab nationalist leaders, President Nasser, in 1969, when Lieutenant Muammar Gaddafi drove past Wheelers Air Base, the biggest American air base. There was several British presences there. And today we're crying over spilt milk. Several decades have passed. The people are in revolution against this dictator. And unfortunately, double standards have prevailed. So, yes, we have the support of the Arab League. Yes, this sort of thing has been tried, with all due respect to William Hague. We were involved in the Yemen when the Imam was overthrown. We were involved in the early days of Oman, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and others. But I want to say that what we have to be thinking about is what happens next. And this is the strategic dilemma that has not yet been addressed as efficiently as the military intervention was a few days ago.
Well, you talk on that theme, you talked about crying over spilt milk, allowing Colonel Gaddafi to take control in the first place. Here now is an opportunity, one would imagine, to see him removed somehow. How should the West, the Arab League, these forces involved go about it?
The Arab League, of course, has a symbolic presence participating, but I think that we have to go back to the beginning of the chapter. In January, on the 25th, a core group of young Egyptian educated zealots moved for revolution and the change of everything in this region. They haven't even agreed to meet Mrs. Clinton today. So I think there has to be an element of authenticity. It's the Arab League talking about the future of the second Arab revolt, which means that in Tunisia and in Egypt, where the security presence is still fighting an internal security battle to maintain control, young people are asking for change. So I think that a regional conference is required whereby the Arabs participate authentically in drawing the veil from the fact that we are simply not talking to everyone concerned. As Arab Thought Forum, we have been making a case study on every Arab country, and we came to the conclusion that we have to talk to everybody, including the refuseniks. Unfortunately, in Libya, Resolution 1970, before 1973, authorizing the use of force, came unnoticed in a sense. It came to focus war crimes, that any killing of civilians by military forces in that country is a war crime. So I think that this point should be drummed home by the Arab League at this time, and the humanitarian situation should be made very, very clear to the regional and international community if we are to save lives and save dignity.
But in Libya, has it moved now beyond talking, being able to achieve anything? You talk very much there about authenticity, about how it's received, particularly in the region there. And the role of the Arab League last week said a no-fly zone should be imposed. Do you think they have to get involved militarily now to prove their commitment to that and to give it, as you say, authenticity?
I think it's a parallel with Lebanon, where the Arab League, for example, did participate with Arab League forces, but that was to contain a situation which was interfactional. And of course, we've noticed that autocracy has largely destroyed secular opposition in many Arab countries over the years. I don't know if you recall again a snippet of history. After World War II, Libya was to be three parts, that is Tripolitania, Fezzan, and Cyrenaica, where Benghazi is. And of course the king of Libya was imposed by the British, or returned by with British help. And I just want to add that the Sanusi family are actually related to my family, so I'm just musing about the past, that if he had had the oil, could he have done something for his people? He only had it for 5 years. The problem is going to mix and match, to be how to mix and match between the resources and a fair deal, as in Iraq. So I think that the Arab League is stumbling at the present time as an organization. Yes, it's taken a resolute position now, but I think that a regional conference for security and cooperation is essential if we are to develop a vision. I mean, we're going with the flow of history. Revolt in Eastern Europe against autocracy in our part of the world. Change must come. But is it the change that these young people are seeking, or is it a return to autocracy? These are the issues that have to be addressed.
And you stress that conference of talking. Is Libya a beacon of how it can all go wrong and lead to violence? Because, of course, the movements continue in so many other countries in the region, in Bahrain, in Yemen, in Syria, in your own country, Jordan. Can talking alone sort those out and bring true democracy?
Well, I agree with you entirely that no, it can't, and that's why I think that a conference on security should focus on security in terms of legality, the constitution, the judiciary. All of this has to function. We can't talk about democracy without legality. We can't talk about soft power without developing a relationship with people. And unfortunately, dialogue is simply not popular in many countries. You mentioned Jordan, Bahrain, Kuwait, Morocco. Look at Morocco. They have taken a position very bravely of recognizing the role of parliamentary institutions. But all of these countries I've mentioned have experience of parliamentary institutions, and I think can move towards democratization. But it's still hard to tell if the restraining factor is always the security factor, what will happen to our diversity. Many of our countries, unfortunately, do not recognize the diversity which is essential to their future lives. And I'm sorry to hear Gaddafi talking about Christians and crusades, because after all, in the Eastern Arab world, Arabs are Muslim and Christians, and they are patriots, and I think that should be recognized. Then we have Sunni Shia divisions. You know, all of these issues have to be addressed by the Arabs themselves.
Yeah, just to press you a bit further on that, Prince Hassan, is that a coded warning to the West, almost saying be careful what you wish for? Because if you say democracy, 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 the character of some of the opposition forces in some of these countries may be precisely the opposite of what you desire, and in particularly to a radical form of Islam.
Well, again, the radical form of Islam is breaking up in Egypt as we speak. You have the Jama'ah of the Muslim Brothers, you have the Salafists and so forth. So, I mean, if you take the security pressure off, these people will begin to divide. And I think that, you know, if you bring about a constitutional reform process where you recognize diversity and pluralism, then people will come out and vote for what they really believe, rather than just the enemy of my enemy is my friend, which is what is happening with Islamist extremism. Iran may not look so worrying if democracy is brought, the spirit of democracy, shall we put it, to the region through constitutional measures. But today we still have Nasrallah, even Sistani, expressing deep concerns over what is happening in Bahrain, which takes us back to the possibility of Iranian intervention. We are Arabs. There are Shia Arabs, there are Shia Sunnis, there are Shia Christians, and this diversity has to be recognized. So it's a process of governance. I think that the West has to make good military intervention and then a regional conference on peace and internal peace in the region. And I'm not talking about peace with Israel alone, I'm talking about internal peace. I think Israel itself has difficulties that have to be resolved, but nobody is talking simply because of the external threat.
Give us an illustration, Prince Hassan, of how you envisage this operating in your own country, in Jordan, where, of course, democracy, as Western governments understand it, doesn't exist. Can it exist? Can it be achieved? And can it be achieved peacefully? And is it something that the royal family there would like to see?
Well, I can't speak for anyone in Jordan. All I can say is that constitutional monarchy is what my father envisaged in 1952. We have a constitution. We're doing a case study on our constitution, which we should commemorate in February 2012. We have a national charter in 1990, which involved everyone across the political spectrum. And it's a question of entering into a very clear hammering out of the fact that Jordan wants to exist, that Jordan is not Palestine, that Jordan is potentially a role model for others in the region. That can happen. But over the past several years, and particularly since the war on terror, the emphasis on security justifies upsetting the apple cart, if you will, of freedom.
And can this be sorted out by countries and groups of countries alone, or beyond the imposition of this no-fly zone over Libya? Should the West stay out of it as much as possible because of the obvious problems of perception and meddling?
Well, I don't think it's perception and meddling. That's for day-to-day commentators and writers. I'm talking about a basic understanding that security and freedom are not opposites. And this applied in Eastern Europe. They celebrated 20 years of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Poland is going to be the next head of the EU for a term. And I think that this can happen in this part of the world if we are in vision mode. At the present time, we are not free enough to develop a vision, an authentic vision in partnership with the West. We attend meetings to respond to a military request, which we believe in, and we take that decision, but we don't deliberate between ourselves the future of where this region is going. And we talk about autocracy or blackmail by dictators. It's going on everywhere. But I do think that there's a salutary lesson to be learned from Libya, and let's hope that other dictators will learn it too.
And Prince Hassan, finally, what are the dangers here? You've talked about potential solutions, but if what you envisage doesn't come about, do we see these protests, these conflicts spreading? We already have to Bahrain, to Saudi Arabia, to Syria.
Well, I agree entirely that that is a potential danger, but let's not forget that Libya is at the center of the world in a sense, because it is Africa, it's Europe, it's the Arab world, and I think in that sense, of course, it's oil, and the Gaddafi defenders continuously say. But I do think that a success in Libya would mean linking the Arab East with the Arab West, and for that matter, the Eastern Mediterranean with the Western Mediterranean in terms of infrastructure. It could be the beginning of a new dawn in terms of our region that I think would be very welcome to the second Arab revolt. But the alternative, I've always spoken about Lebanonization, Balkanization, Somaliization. We don't need that at this time or at any time. I think we've suffered enough.
Prince Hassan, thank you very much indeed for your time. Prince Hassan of Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thoughts about the regional security challenges as the operation to impose a no-fly zone over Libya